Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Taking Care of Your Temple podcast. I am Dr. Melissa Rich. I have a great guest today who I will introduce in just a little bit. And let me go through the things that I always talk about at the beginning of a podcast. The objective of this, what I'm trying to do, is to help women connect with God regularly and to improve their physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. So I have 4 principles that I suggest using to help you do this. The first one is to keep our focus on God. So let me ask my guest here, how easy is that to do?
It can be difficult from time to time.
That's an understatement. Yes, it can. There are so many things in life. We're so busy. All these distractions come up.
Mm-hmm.
So if you feel like you are constantly pulling yourself back, yeah, that you're doing
That's
it right.
normal.
It's
Yeah.
normal. It is very normal. The next thing is to acknowledge that we are not enough on our own. We are not smart enough, strong enough, pretty enough, rich enough, whatever it is. And this was something that I had a harder time doing when I was younger. You know, age does bring some wisdom, at least a little bit. So now I'm like, I need help.
Mm-hmm.
And I have no problem saying that. Okay, also remembering it is about progress, not about perfection. I think as women, we tend to really expect way too much of ourselves and not give ourselves enough credit, whatever.
We're our biggest critics.
Yeah, we can be. And then the fourth thing is to work on consciously changing our thoughts. And this is important because the messages that we give ourselves really determine how we think, act, feel, everything. So that's an important one to do. Okay, I have a verse for this podcast. 1 Corinthians 3:16. Do you not know that you are God's temple and that God's Spirit dwells in you? I thought that was very appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
So let me go ahead and say a quick prayer and then we will get going. Lord, I just thank you so much for letting Kris be here with me today. Thank you for giving us this platform. And I just pray that the things that we talk about will be helpful to the people who are listening. Thank you for loving us. Amen. So I have here today Kris Rhodes, a friend of mine, and she is the funeral director in charge of Grace Gardens Funeral Home. Did I say that right?
You did.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so we're going to find out more about what you do, but let's back up a little bit. Tell us about the family that you grew up in and the family that you have now. What was it like growing up with your family and what's your family like now?
I was the youngest of 4 children.
Mm.
I grew up in Clear Lake down by NASA Johnson Space
Yeah.
Center.
Been
I
there.
had an idyllic childhood.
Oh, good for you.
I mean, I loved my parents big. I was close to my grandparents.
Very cool. Yeah.
So, no,
Okay.
couldn't ask for anything better.
Yeah. Are both your parents still living and are you in touch with your siblings? Because you had 3, right?
Mm-hmm. My mother lives a couple blocks from me.
Oh, okay.
My sister's in Houston. And my
Right.
brother's in Missouri, and then one of my brothers has already passed,
Okay.
and my dad has passed.
Okay. So the family that you have, it sounds like you do stay connected to them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. What about your family now? Because I think you're married and you have kids. Okay.
Just celebrated my 29th anniversary.
Oh.
I know, because I don't feel older than that.
Yeah, but that's, especially as a former marriage and family therapist, that's significant. 29 years.
9 years.
Oh, good for you.
And we have a 23-year-old in college that
Wow.
will never graduate, and it's okay. Made peace with that. And then a 21-year-old,
Okay.
and he skipped the college route. He's
What's he doing?
entered the working world.
Okay.
He has
Where-
a real estate license, and he's doing landscaping. Hopes to
Okay.
do HVAC over the summer. He's just acquiring skill.
Yeah. That's not a bad thing. And you know what? I mean, I've taught at a couple of universities, but I always tell people college is not going anywhere.
Mm-mm.
You can always get it later if you need it. So,
Exactly.
I mean, good for him. So what does your husband do?
He's an ordained minister,
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
and he was on staff at a church for a long, long time, but now he works for me.
Really? At the funeral home?
Fabulous, yes.
Oh, how nice.
He's kind of my right-hand man.
Oh, so it's a family operation.
Well, yes, in many ways.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I looked it up and did some research and found that about 43% of funeral directors in the U.S. currently are women and the rest are men. However, about 40 years ago, women were only about 5%
Very
of
low.
funeral directors. So what caused the shift? Do you know?
Well, I think women, we've conquered many industries.
Yeah.
And so I think part of it's just that
Yeah.
women have entered the working force.
Yep.
We're loud and ready to go. Don't take no for an answer. But God created us. We're more compassionate, nurturing, just
Yeah. That was my thought too. I didn't want to be sexist and say that, but I do think there's some truth to that.
mhm. And families are moving away, needing a standoff professional.
Yeah.
They need the comfort and the familiarity that
Yeah.
women, we form relationships faster too.
Exactly. We tend to be nurturers more. And if there's ever a time you need nurturing, it's when you're going through grief.
Absolutely.
So I did not put this on your questions. I'm going to go off script here a little bit. What was COVID like for the industry? I mean, I know you were getting a lot of customers, but you weren't able to do things the way that you normally had done in the past. So what was that frustrating for you all? I mean, what?
It was heartbreaking to have. I remember, and I'll never forget it. I had a family that they had 5 children. And so each of them are married and have children.
Yeah.
And we had the 10 person limit in the building. And if knowing what I know now on this side, I would have been like, come in. Like, it doesn't matter. But on that time, we were scared and cautious. And I mean, they were all going to go eat together at home.
Right.
But they had literally had the same service 3 times so that everybody could cycle through. It was miserable.
Yeah.
Or you're paying the same expense,
but
only allowed to have 10 people come. But it seemed like forever in the moment.
Yeah.
Looking back, it was really just a blip. We just had those restrictions for a blip.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank goodness. My dad passed away when he was 90, like a month or 2 before COVID hit. And he retired minister, retired missionary. And I'm the oldest of 5 kids. So when we had his funeral, we had over 100 people there easily. And, the dinner afterwards and everything. And we were all saying, once we got into COVID, oh my gosh, so glad that he passed away before that, because he had dementia, wasn't doing real well. Not that he would have been there for the funeral. That really sounded weird. Didn't it? He would have said, why are there more people here? But just having to had gone through COVID in the nursing home, I just feel like that was so hard for some of those residents. They didn't know what was going on.
We saw some really bad stuff.
Oh, I know. I felt bad for that. Okay, sorry. I did get off script.
It's all right.
Okay, so how old were you when you realized that this is what you wanted to do?
42.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that. So,
well, I was 42 when I got licensed.
Okay.
No, when I realized I wanted to do this, I was in my 30s.
That's still, so it's not like you just grew up with this. Because that was going to be my next question. Does anyone in your family do this?
No.
So how did you come into it? What happened?
When my dad passed away, he just didn't wake up Christmas morning.
Oh.
And when we got to the third
Christmas morning. Oh my.
No.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's hard.
We got to the 3rd hospital. They kept moving us around and it was clear what was happening. So I called our family's funeral home and that funeral director said, Kristen, you take care of your mom. I'm going to handle everything else. And he did, and it was amazing. And then 5 years later on New Year's Day, oddly, my brother passed.
Oh.
And so, of course, we called the same funeral home.
Yeah, of course.
Our guy was out of town. And so we got the justice of the peace / funeral director. And he was a little colorful and vivid and shared way too much about what had happened and
TMI.
Had some opinions that just really made me think, even if what you assume about my brother was true, which it's not, my mother still deserves care, respect, and dignity. Yeah. And that is literally when God put the call on my heart.
Interesting.
Families need advocates, not judges.
Exactly. Well, especially at a time like that.
Thankfully, my mother had an ear infection, so she had very little hearing.
Okay. She wasn't aware of much what was going on.
She didn't hear all the things that I heard.
Just as well. Well, when I was in college, I was at University of Central Oklahoma. It was called Central State University at the time, and they had at least at that time, it was one of the largest funeral director programs in the country. And a friend of mine was going through it because his dad was a funeral director, and their thing was, we'll never be without a job. There's always going to be funerals. And I thought, well, that's true. There's job security.
There's a big fear during COVID that people were going to just give up on funerals because so many couldn't attend. And they thought people are just going to get over this. No,
I would think as soon as they could, they went back to having them. Yeah.
And the numbers have actually increased. Participation had kind of waned a little. Now people make a point to come.
Yeah, because you can now.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. So how do you train to do this? I mean, is there certification or license? What goes into it?
So I already had my bachelor's from Baylor,
Okay.
which was a good thing
Yeah.
because all my prerequisites were
Right. Have
covered.
been met. Yeah.
So it was just a 6-month certification
Okay.
program. I had to take a mortuary law exam through the
Okay.
state. Then I had to take this coursework. Then you have to take a state board exam and pass that. Then you have an apprenticeship it
Right.
can last a year, but you can do it quicker. And I, of course, did. 45 cases. So,
Wow.
but you have to have a licensed funeral director oversee everything.
Right. Yeah.
Now, if I had chosen to embalm as well, it would have been a year and 90 cases.
Okay. But you don't do that.
I'm a hand holder.
Yeah. You're a nurturer. I mean, there's no doubt, and an encourager. And so I can see how this niche fit you really, really well.
Mm-hmm. I do believe God created me to do this.
No, I think you're right. What were you doing before that? I'm just curious.
I was a mom.
Okay.
I worked in the nursing home as an activity director,
Gotcha.
had babies, and then this.
Okay. So he was preparing you well for this.
I think so.
Cool. Just curious, are any of your kids interested in doing this?
Not even a little.
Yeah. Because sometimes that does happen. You know, you grow up and see mom or dad doing something and you think, oh, I could do that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's just you and your husband.
And he's more support. He doesn't. I told him yesterday, if you would get your license, I would help you.
Yeah.
He's not interested.
Yeah. So just kind of a problem solver and fixer?
Well, he does my AR. So he does my books.
Okay. Okay. Accounts receivable. Yeah. Gotcha.
And then he makes sure my facilities are the way I want them, clean and in order. He works services with me. And then if there's a family that doesn't have a minister, I have a built-in chaplain.
That's right. That's handy.
Because everybody wants a church service.
Yeah.
But not everybody wants to go to church.
Do you have a chapel there?
Mm-hmm, we do.
Okay.
Seats about 230.
Oh, wow. Now, do all funeral homes do that? Have a chapel on site?
No.
Okay.
I would say probably 85% do though.
Okay. No, because I think you're right. Thinking about it, people do want some type of a service, but if they don't have an affiliation to a church, they may not, but y'all are more neutral ground.
Right. The other thing that's interesting that I've heard a couple of people say, if we take mom's casket to the church we grew up in or the church we've always gone to, we'll never be able to worship there again because that's all we'll see.
Oh,
now that's not a traditional thought.
Right. Right.
Like our parents didn't feel that way.
No, and
that was natural.
Yeah.
But the younger people, they don't want death in their space.
Okay. I'd never thought about that, but that does make sense because we all grow up differently. So you talked about it a little bit. What does a typical funeral director do? I mean, what is your job?
I always start with filing the death certificate. I get all the vital statistic information, plug it into the system. We get all the permits that are necessary for the different things. But then when we meet with the family, a lot of them have never done this.
Right.
And it's a huge concept. So we have to listen. We have to hear what they're not saying and then take them through each step. You kind of have to back off when they get overwhelmed and circle back. Or
I found out my husband passed away about 13 years ago now, and I had no clue of any of the process.
Wow.
Yeah. And fortunately, I did have a good funeral home that I was working with, and they did a lot of stuff that I probably wasn't even aware of. But yeah, there's a lot of hoops that you have to jump through when somebody passes away that you don't think about unless you've been through that.
I tell people it's like planning a wedding with none of the time or any of the joy.
Yeah.
But all of the details.
Yeah.
So we call the florist, we call the pastor, we handle things at the cemetery. I had a family that didn't even know what cemetery.
Yeah.
So we jumped in the car and I drove them around and showed them some.
Okay. So you're basically walking the family through the process because there is a process. I mean, a lot of, from what I gleaned, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like a lot of what happens when someone dies is state mandated. There are things that have to be done.
Yes. Mortuary law. There's certain things.
Yes, that's what I thought. And so I guess the family either does it themselves or they get a funeral home to help them do it.
It's a lot. You can do it on your own, but if you've never done it, where do you start? And it takes a lot longer.
Yeah. I was just surprised. One of the things I remember being surprised about is I needed so many copies of the death certificate when Ed died because everybody needed one. And I kept like, what? But I'm like, I guess that's just
We have made it like a little booklet, and it has all kinds of things to help families think through that.
yeah.
COVID, one of the good things, people are more likely to take a scan or a fax or an upload, whereas before they wanted that certified death certificate.
Right. Yes, I remember that.
So
That was
now
the thing. I had to get certified. I had to keep going back and get more certified death certificates. Yeah.
people aren't needing as many,
Okay.
which is a big shift.
Yes. Well, because I guess, as you said, during COVID, it was probably a pain to get them.
Well, people didn't want to touch something that somebody else had touched. They didn't know where it
Okay.
came from.
Yeah.
Because at that time, none of us knew how it was being transmitted.
Yeah. Oh, there was a lot of misinformation floating around.
So
Yeah.
people are like, please don't touch something and mail it to me. Like,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Because if you fax it, then it just comes out on their end. They can control. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay. So I have to think that this can be a fairly stressful job at times because the people that you're working with, as you said, it's not like a wedding. They are grieving. They are scared, anxious, unhappy. Is this stressful for you? And if so, how do you deal with it?
it can be extremely stressful.
Yeah.
It can be extremely rewarding too if you
Yeah.
help people. But no, there's a lot of stress. Our work environment, we all are good friends and we
Okay.
support each other. Some morticians probably have the darkest humor.
I would
I
imagine.
mean, so
Well, it's a way to relieve tension.
yes. And but doing a good job and helping a family, I don't know, that kind of mitigates it somehow.
Yeah. Yeah. No, because you're making some good come into the bad.
It offsets that
Yeah.
stress.
Absolutely. And you have to think if you weren't there doing what you're doing, how much worse it would be for that family.
Mhm. Exactly.
No, that makes perfect sense to me. So nobody likes to think or talk about dying. I mean, it's just not the most popular topic. Oh, in fact, I was going to ask you, I forgot to write this down. When people who don't know you, like if you're at a function somewhere, what do you do? Who are you? And you say you're a funeral director, is that like a conversation stopper?
Sometimes if they go one of two ways, they're like backing up, or they're like, "Oh, tell me all the stories."
Yeah.
And I'm not good on the spot. Like I
Yeah.
have to tell me something, and then I can spring off of it.
Right. But I had thought of that the other day. Yeah, I bet that's just people are like, oh, okay.
Typically, there's more fascination
Huh.
than standoffish.
Well, I guess that's better. So, okay.
And I did make some notes on that question
Yeah,
because you
go
were
for it.
saying, what did people ask me again?
Uh, ah, I said nobody likes to talk or think about dying, but I have to think that there are things you can do to make things easier when you lose someone. So, what are some of those things that people can do?
So the very, very minimum, discuss it with your family. Like, do you want to be buried or cremated? During COVID, when people were passing
Oh, yeah.
rapidly and people did
Yeah.
not know,
Yeah.
they were really stressed. I don't know what dad wanted. And
Right.
it's a huge financial difference.
Yes. Yes.
So at the very minimum, have the conversation of what
Okay.
you would like. Then there's other steps that can help.
Okay.
And we'll talk about it later on one of your questions, but give the right of disposition to someone.
What does that mean? Right of disposition.
You give somebody permission to make all of your plans. They have the authority
So that means like if you are already dead or if you're like
once you pass.
unaware.
Yeah,
I see.
it's not like a power of attorney.
Okay.
It's once you've died,
Okay.
this person is the shot caller.
So they're the one that everybody goes to say, what do we do about this? What do we do about that? Okay. So you can designate that person.
And it doesn't have to be a family member,
No, I can see that. Yeah. Just somebody who can make decisions. Okay.
or at least understands your choices.
Right.
Now, you can go as far as prearranging, go in and talk to
Yeah,
somebody at the
yeah.
funeral home. You don't have to pre-fund it. Just put it down. Let them make a file.
I didn't realize that.
Mhm.
You don't have to prepay for it.
Mm-mm.
So you can just, because I know people who do that, have just arranged, these are the songs I want sung at my funeral. This is the music. This is what I want to wear, all that. And they can do that and not have to pay anything. It's just, it's there ready for them when they need it.
On file. And you can go a step further and pre-fund it
Yeah,
if they want to.
yeah,
But the more information that's out there,
right.
the better. And it's a gift to your family because they don't have to think about any of those.
Yes.
My mother could not come up with a song for my dad's service. And it wasn't like, it was like, okay, this question's here. We'll come back. No, she couldn't move past that.
Wow. Yeah. She was stuck.
It was bad.
Yeah, because you can't make her pick something.
Mm-mm.
Did she ever finally come up with something?
She accepted some things, but I think she would not do that again. I think she would have made a different decision.
Yeah. What can you do? And the thing is, at some point, you kind of have to make a decision and move on.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just be stuck there forever.
Mm-mm.
All right. Any other things on that
On
one?
my little list.
Yes.
Well, the biggest thing that I don't like seeing is, and it's especially widows that it affects, when they purchase out of emotion.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So if you have already come in and picked it out,
Yeah.
they were just following what he wanted.
Right. Right.
Versus making an emotional purchase, which is never good.
Well, and I think I've seen it where people, because of emotion, they're picking the most expensive coffin that they really can't afford, and that the person isn't going to know anyway.
Neither are the people that attend.
Yeah,
They're not
exactly.
going to look at that and go, oh, wow, what a nice casket.
Yeah, yeah. Or that's the really cheap model. Yeah, people aren't going to know.
They're
Okay.
going to look at the flowers or the flag
Yeah,
and the deceased.
yeah. And that's it. Maybe some pictures. Okay. Anything else before we move on? If you had
That was
anything.
it.
Yeah. Okay. So what are some things that maybe people typically neglect to do that can cause problems once they're not here anymore?
Right.
I can think of one big one, but I want to hear what.
Well, the things that I have seen is they neglect to change the ownership of real property.
Oh, okay.
And they also forget to change beneficiaries.
Yeah.
So if my husband was my beneficiary of my life insurance and he passes,
Yeah.
I don't change that, my kids are going to have a lot of trouble.
Yeah. I mean, I think they can go to court and get that changed, but it's a lot of.
It's a lot of hoopla.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. What I was going to say, and I didn't know if this matters or not, but the best thing they can do is make a will so that they have those designations made.
But then somebody's got to know where it is.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. Now, I know when you came, you spoke at, was it Female Executives of Waco, I think, and you handed around you had some forms that people can fill out that can really help them for that. I'm assuming most funeral homes, if you ask them.
They should.
Yeah.
Ours is called a thoughtful decision guide,
Okay.
and it's provided from like the people we use our pre-need policies through.
Right.
But I mean, we've got a ton of them, and most places have some kind of form.
And it was very comprehensive. I thought, I was reading through it going, oh, I would never have thought about this. And you don't.
Right.
So, cool.
And that's the point. That's our whole purpose.
Yes. Yeah. So here's one of my pet peeves as a former therapist. I think a lot of people are really uncomfortable with the whole grief and dying thing. And so when they're at a funeral, some of them have no clue what to say to the person who is grieving. So they say some things they should not say because they don't know what to say. Are there any guidelines for if someone is grieving, what can you say? You can't fix it. You can't make it better. But what can you say that would?
So I wrote down a bunch on
Okay,
this.
good. Let's hear them.
When I was a student at Baylor, I took a class called Death and Dying.
Yeah, I've taught one. Yeah.
Phenomenal class. Everybody should take it.
Yeah, I agree.
Two of the things she said that stays with me and I use daily. Number one is, however that person lost their loved one, that's the most tragic way.
That's a good point.
Don't compare it.
Yeah,
well, at least he didn't suffer.
Oh gosh.
No,
Yeah.
this is the most tragic thing that could have happened.
Yep.
Just acknowledge that.
Yeah.
And then the second one is they need to understand how much their person impacted the world.
Yes, that's a good one.
And so you say things like, if you knew them personally,
right,
you express the change they made in your life or the impact they had in your life.
Yes.
And if you didn't know them personally, you can still make a general, like, your mom must have been amazing because you're so amazing.
Oh,
I know you're
good.
going to miss her.
Yeah.
You have to speak to the hugeness of the loss.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that, and I tell people to do that a lot too, is people get so uncomfortable. I've had people who've lost someone who said, no one will talk about John.
Mm-mm. Oh, that's on my list too.
Yeah.
Say their name.
Yes,
People need to reminisce.
yes, yes,
If you meet a 95-year-old woman, she can still tell you about giving birth. Now, that was a traumatic experience, a good trauma,
Yeah.
but still trauma. That's how we process trauma, as you know. We discuss it.
yes, exactly.
So they may need to talk about, oh, John was sick for
Yeah.
6 months and I didn't get him to the doctor, or he
Right,
refused.
right.
They need to process
And we
everything that
process
happened.
verbally a lot. Yeah, exactly.
And they may tell you the same thing 10
And
times.
that's okay.
Let them do it.
Yeah. Because again, a lot of people don't like to hear it. They're not comfortable with hearing about this whole death situation.
Or they make excuses. Oh, well, there's no way you could have known if you didn't. No, they need to process. Let
Yeah.
them work
Yeah.
it through.
Yeah, and go ahead.
And then you just need to remember them, or let them
Yes,
remember them.
yes.
You know, I was just thinking about John the other day. What would he have thought about XYZ?
Yeah.
And they will light up.
That gives them a chance to talk about it. And I always tell people, if you have any stories, tell them.
Mm-hmm.
Last year when we went on that camp out, he did the funniest thing. That's okay. People are like, well, that's not really appropriate in your grieving. No, they want to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
So cool. So share stories, let them talk. What else? You said you got a list.
So when I had a miscarriage, which is not the same as losing a spouse,
But still.
my Sunday school teacher showed up on her lunch hour.
Aww.
She didn't say a word. She went straight to my washing machine, pulled out the clothes, started folding, went into my kitchen, washed the dishes, unloaded the dishwater, washer, and went back to work.
Aww.
Don't say, if you need anything, call me. They're not gonna, because they don't know what they need.
Yeah.
You show up with groceries, or when you're at HEB, say, hey, I was just thinking about you. Can I grab you XYZ? Show up with paper goods. If they're going to have family come in.
Yes, that's a good one.
Mow their yard.
I've heard that before. Yes.
Do their lawn. Don't say, if you need, you think of something and go do it. Right. And at the very least, in a couple of months, take them for coffee.
Yes, because everybody's there right after the funeral, and then they're gone. They're very happy to escape and get back to their lives, but then that person is still there. And I really agree. I think it's absolutely true. I always say, don't ask people what you can do for them, because they don't know. Mm-hmm. Either one, they may not feel comfortable asking, or two, they just can't think of anything right then. So just, if you see something that needs to be done, do it.
Do it.
Yeah.
Or even if you're one of these planner people, because you hear about those ladies at church that they always have a casserole in the freezer.
Oh.
Always do it. Have it ready to go.
That's excellent.
Think of your thing.
Yeah.
And just let that be the thing you do when things happen.
And I don't do casseroles that much because I don't eat them. But what I have done a lot is I'll give people a gift card to a favorite restaurant. Mm-hmm. They can use it whenever they want to. Nowadays, you can get it delivered.
Right.
And it doesn't go bad. You don't have to return a dish. You know, it's pretty easy. And then, and I do cook, but if you can't, you know, everybody likes pizza.
They do.
So good. Anything else on your list?
I think I feel very passionate about those things. So yes. I think I got them all.
Okay. Okay.
What you said not to do?
Yes. What are some things not to say or do? Because boy, that's what I'm passionate about. I have a list, but let's see what you've got.
You don't want to say trite things like they're in a better place.
Oh gosh, that drives me crazy.
They're your angel now. Like, first of all, that's all bad theology.
Thank you. I've always said that. No, angels and people are two different
creations.
Yes, yes. People do not become angels when they die.
No.
It drives me crazy.
It makes me a little crazy too.
Yes.
At least they're not suffering anymore. People say that all the time. Yeah. God only picks the best.
And that makes you mad at God, especially if you're not real close to him.
Oh, yeah.
God needed them in heaven more than you did. And so, so then you're mad at God because he took the person. Yeah.
And sorry for your loss. They didn't lose them. Like, they didn't go missing.
That's true. Yeah.
Those little trite things, especially when it's children.
Yes.
To say, oh, they're not, they don't care. They want them here. In that moment.
Yeah. I haven't heard this one in a while, but I used to hear a few times, well, at least you still have the other kids.
Yeah.
No, that does not help at all.
Oh, you've got 10 fingers. You're missing 2. At least you got, no, you kind of still want them.
Yeah, you do. You do.
And it's people trying to help.
Yes, they mean well. Yes.
But
Some of those things are not helpful.
and if you can't, just be quiet, just be there, just go and sit.
Yeah. What I will say to people a lot of times is, this is another one. I know how you feel. Because no, you don't. Every situation is unique. Don't say that.
You can say, I remember how I felt.
Yes, yes. One of the things that I will say is, I can only imagine how difficult this must be for you.
Yeah, that's good.
Something like that to let them know that you're sympathetic. And then I will say, what was one of the things that he did well or she did well? What did you really, how did you all meet? Or just, as you say, get them talking, get them reminiscing. And as you said before, even 2 or 3 months down the road, keep doing that. They need to process.
Yes.
What about, I got this in therapy a lot, people who, the son or the daughter passed away, and 2 years later, the parent still has the room exactly as it was. I had that happen with, I think it was a spouse who had passed away. And the wife came in and told me that it had been like 8 months, and she had not cleared, she wasn't ready to. His sister came to visit, and while she was at work, she cleared out everything, trying to be helpful because that was her way of doing it. And the wife, she said, it took everything I had not to just smack her in the face. She said, I was not ready for that. So I think you have to be careful with that type of thing as well. Even trying to be helpful, people have different timelines. Now, having said that, if it's been 10 years, okay, maybe
you may need to drive them to a therapist.
Yes, do an intervention or something, but everybody grieves at a different rate. Yeah. Okay. So we kind of talked about this, but I know people who are dealing with really intense grief can a lot of times feel almost numb and really have just a hard time making decisions. I've heard people say, I feel like I'm trying to move through fog, or,
grief brain is real.
Oh, yeah, it is. So not being able to make decisions, how does the funeral home help with that?
I'm trying to find that question because I know I wrote stuff down right here. Have you ever? Nope, that's family drama. So it is overwhelming, and I told you, like planning a wedding.
Yeah.
But we try to just take them one step at a time. I have lots of checklists. I have checklists for us.
Right.
I have checklists for the family. Something, because even if we sit and plan it all, when you get home, you're not going to remember any of it. So we write it all down.
Yeah.
And then I circle the things that we have to come back to. Like, you didn't get the pallbearers.
Right.
Well, it's too much to come up with all that right now.
Yeah.
You go home and you think about pallbearers.
Yes.
And then I give every way they can contact us about 5 different times.
Because they're not thinking clearly and they're not going to remember. Yeah. So I think the writing down is really good, and having a checklist for them is very helpful, because I found that even in doing therapy or hypnosis, I tell them things a couple of times. They don't remember. They get home.
There's something else on their mind.
Yes. Yeah. So even though it's perfectly obvious to me, it's not always to them. Okay. Now let's get to the family drama.
Oh,
I know that death often brings out the worst in people. So have you ever been in the middle of huge family drama?
I remember a family that we're in the arrangement conference, and the stepfather and the children went to hit each other over my head, and I had to push back from the table not to get in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And I just said, this is not how she would want y'all to behave. Y'all got to come to a compromise. This is not honoring her at all.
No.
And all of those people still come and see me to this day. They drop in and visit.
Yeah. And I think it does. I've seen it where it really is, it's about money or possessions. They're all trying to get in there and grab the stuff that they want, which is
some kind of control.
Pretty deplorable. But I think also sometimes it's just emotions are so raw. Like, no, mom wouldn't want that. Yes, she would. And they start butting heads.
Because everybody's relationship with that person is different.
Right.
So, and I had a family where the sisters did not. And the one sister was not going to come to the service. I'm not coming. I'm not going to be in the room with her. And I said, we do the right thing because of who we are. irregardless of how anybody else acts or behaves. You'll never forgive yourself if you're not at your dad's funeral.
Yeah.
And so she brought me this little bracelet. I wear it every day.
Aww.
It had the little sacred heart and the goat because she said I'm the greatest of all time. And
Nice.
she sat in the back. She didn't sit with the family, but
That's okay, but she was
said,
there.
I would not have been okay if I hadn't come.
No.
So thank you for pushing me, was basically her.
Oh, goodness.
I had to tell a father the other day. I said, because he kept talking about his right to this. And I finally said, you're right. Those are your rights. But here's your choice. You can be right or you can be at peace, but you're not going to be at both.
Yeah.
And for this to honor your son and the choices he made,
right,
you're going to have to put your rights in the back burner.
Yeah.
And it totally changed.
Yeah. They're not looking at it from that perspective. I used to tell people, again, as a family therapist, you can be right or you can be married. You're not going to probably be able to do both here.
Exactly.
But I think that as women, especially, we can do that in a kind of a non-confrontive, non-threatening way that it doesn't get people's back up.
Right.
And that can be helpful.
Well, it puts it in perspective because what you're saying is you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, we more or less said that is your right. You're correct. But and sometimes that's all they need to hear. Yeah.
Yes, that you're affirming the fact that you recognize, yes, in a perfect world, you would be able to do this. However, if you do it now,
there are going to be consequences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you may not like them later. And people, I think a lot of times aren't thinking that far ahead because they're so caught up in the grief and the emotions and the loss. And so I think it's good that you guys are there telling them that. What are some of the biggest regrets that people have once they lose someone?
Well, there's all kinds, but normally it's the things that were not said that they meant to say.
Or the things that they did say.
Well, I don't deal with that as much.
Okay.
More the not, or
that's
they didn't
true.
do.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because now they're out of time and they can't do it.
And guilt and regret make the ugliest grief.
Yeah.
And I learned that in the nursing home.
Yeah. It just really, to me, reinforces that you need to keep short accounts. And if there's something, especially with a family member, that is not working well, give them grace, work it through, because you just don't know. They could be gone the next day, and then you're going to be beating yourself up over the fact that was so stupid. Why did I dig my heels in
about that?
Yeah.
As the youngest of 4, I learned a lot from my siblings.
Yeah.
My sister would get so angry with her husband if he didn't get her what she wanted for her birthday. Well, she never said.
I was going to say, did she tell him?
No. How's he going to come up with these?
Yeah.
So I learned you have 2 choices. You tell somebody what you want.
Yeah.
And then if it doesn't happen, then there's a conversation.
Okay. Yeah.
Or if you're not willing to ask for it, then you don't get mad when you don't get it.
Exactly. People are not mind readers, even people who love you.
Right.
No, especially men reading a women's mind. This is that does not happen very well.
You can leave the catalog open. Yeah. And they're not going to know what you're doing.
No. And so many men, I've heard they got their wife a crock pot for her birthday.
And all that means is you want me to cook?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they're thinking, this is cool because, she had said the other day that she liked it, and it's like, yeah, no, you're totally not getting that. And they are not going to, bless their hearts. Yeah. They are not going to read your mind. Okay. And if I'm skipping stuff that you want to talk about, tell me. Do funeral homes typically have a counselor or a chaplain on staff to help people, or is that the funeral director?
Well, we're not supposed to give therapy or counseling.
Right.
I mean, we can give direction.
Okay.
But there's a fine line.
Yeah.
We are fortunate. There are lots of grief groups in churches.
Right.
All hospices provide grief support, whether you were on their service or not.
Okay. So you have resources that you can point them to, because they're not going to know those either, probably.
No. And we follow up with them. Like our website has different grief support.
Good.
We have a texting aftercare that will send grief support links. Yeah. And then we send them little booklets.
Okay.
But if we notice, like we've got a lady whose son passed and she won't leave the house. It's been 2 years.
Oh.
And so like, well, maybe think about talking to these people.
Yeah.
There are some therapists that you
Yeah,
can visit with. So
2 years ago, that was probably during COVID. So she got COVID and the loss of her son, and people weren't leaving home then anyway. So
now she's stuck in that.
double whammy. Yeah. Now she's probably got some agoraphobia going on.
Yeah. So, and it happens.
Yeah.
But that's why you've got to kind of push them to the resources that there are, because there are so many resources out there.
Yeah. So I'm going to skip one question unless you have that. No, you didn't have that. Okay. Or you don't have very much. It's really hard. It can be very hard to watch someone grieve and not be able to fix things, especially if it's someone that we love.
Right.
So if some of our listeners have someone in that position, what are some things, if any, that maybe they can do to kind of help things get better?
Again, the listening that we already spoke about.
Yes.
And go check on them. Take them to dinner. I had a lady tell me, and she was being cute, but you could feel it. She said, my preferred pronouns were us and we. I don't like being an I and me.
An I and me. Yeah. I thought about that. Yeah.
You know, how hard would that to be good to go out to dinner?
Yeah. By yourself.
So, I mean, like, keep checking in with them and don't give up. Took my mom 14 months to be my mom again. I mean, that was all she ever knew.
Yeah. Right.
And scared and fearful.
Sure.
And you just have to keep reassuring.
Yeah. It's going to get better.
And if you make a mistake, you make a mistake. Then we fix it.
Yeah.
The world's not going to come down on you.
Yeah. It can be overwhelming, though. I mean, especially in the beginning when you are used to having a partner or, this child or, very hard.
So patience and grace are the biggest keys.
Yeah.
And then just continually being available.
Consistency, persistence. Yeah. Yeah. It's a hard thing to get through, but I think it's important to talk about it because it is something that happens to all of us. Death and taxes.
Right.
The only two things that are totally
guaranteed.
Yeah. Guaranteed to happen.
I remembered I made a note about, and it might not have been here. I watched a video. Yeah, it is on there. She was talking about her husband had passed, and people would say, "Why aren't you over this? It's been 5 years."
Gosh.
And she's like, "Well, your child's 4. Why aren't you over that? Like, you don't get over it.
No.
You move forward with it." And that's a misconception that people think you go through grief.
Right.
No, you just learn to adjust and carry it differently.
Yeah.
You never get over it.
I'm sure you've read the book, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross on death and dying. And when she first wrote it, the thought, there are, I think, 5 stages. It's been a while since I read it. And the thought was that you just kind of went through each stage sequentially. What they're finding now is that you go up some, then you come back to another one, you go up. You just keep kind of zigzagging back and forth. And one day you may be at stage 1 and the next day you may be at stage 3. There's no real consistency, especially in the beginning.
Right.
So you just have to kind of be patient and be supportive and
navigate the best that you can.
Yeah.
And so that's my thing is grief never ends. You learn how to carry it. Just help somebody carry their grief.
Yeah.
And there is, because people will think, it's been 2 years, I shouldn't still be sad about this. Well, yeah, and give them that opportunity to still be sad about it because they're sad about it in that moment.
Right.
Whereas they may laugh about something that happened in 5 minutes.
I think when I was growing up, the prevailing wisdom was it takes a year to recover from grief. Well, and now they're finding, it can be a little bit shorter, it can be longer, and people just do it differently. I will say, I think the first year may be tougher because it's the first of everything. This is the first birthday without them. This is the first Christmas or whatever. And at least once you get through that, in some ways it can be a little bit easier. But
the unknown is taken away.
Yes, that's I think a big part of it. You don't know what this is going to look like or be like. How am I going to do this without this person? As you said, the one who didn't like the I and the me. Yeah, you're kind of there for, unless I guess you meet somebody else. It's going to be.
But even when you meet somebody else, you still have that.
Oh yeah,
that grief.
It's not going to erase all the stuff that happened before. It may change things a bit. Okay, you've been so good. Thank you so much for guesting. And if people want to, I mean, they probably won't want to contact you if they're like in Arizona, but if they want to find out more about this, they can just contact their local funeral home, go by and talk to somebody, make an appointment.
Absolutely. And especially here in our area in Waco, there's so many funeral homes. People don't feel like if it's not a good fit, like if you go to a doctor and you don't love it, you go to a different doctor.
Right.
For some reason, people don't feel like they can do that with funeral homes. Absolutely be your own advocate.
Yeah.
Because it's not one size fits all. Somebody may not want somebody who wants to be familiar in your family.
Right.
They may want the standoffish.
Yeah.
Find it. Find
it's out there.
But do it before you need it.
That's very good advice. Don't wait until,
because they're going to come up to you in the hospital and say, "Who do I call?" And you're going to go,
yeah. No.
And you don't want somebody else making that choice for you.
No, you really don't. I mean, it's just, it's a difficult situation, but I think doing what you said, going ahead and contacting, getting some things in place, meeting people, that's going to make it be a little less difficult. And that's what you want.
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. All right. I'm going to tell you all a few Waco facts, because I always try to include some of these are Central Texas. So there is a time capsule in Texas that has a passbook to a bank account that's expected to be worth $1 quadrillion by the time it's opened in 2968. I don't even know how much a quadrillion is. Sounds like a lot.
Not even a real number.
No, exactly. So the Helium Centennial Time Columns Monument was built in 1968 in honor of the 100th anniversary of the discovery of helium. Helium is a big thing in Texas. I don't know if you knew that. I didn't know until I started researching. So one of the time capsules sealed on the monument is set to open 1,000 years from that date. And they opened a bank account with a $10 bill for that. That's how much it'd be worth then. And it's located at the Don Harrington Discovery Center. It's an interactive nonprofit science center and planetarium in Amarillo, Texas. Well, that was really cool.
That is really cool.
Yeah. So, if we bury a $10 bill now or put it in a bank, not bury it, put it in a bank, in 1,000 years from now, we won't be here, but,
But it'll be a whole bunch of money.
A whole bunch of money. All right. Thank you all so much for listening. I really hope that this was helpful. Thank you to Kris for coming. You've been great. And y'all, if you are going to need, and we all will at some time, some type of help with funerals, with grief, with loss, don't wait until the last minute. Go ahead and get some things in place. You will be much happier if you do. All right. I will see you guys next week. Everyone have a good one. Bye.